Hello, and welcome to my video in which I'm going to show you my favourite method for reforming stitches into a rib on a single bed knitting machine. This is discussed in my book, Single and Double Bed Machine Knitting: The Designer's Guide, which is available from Crowwood Press and is exclusively about machine knitting. For this reforming of a rib, there is no need to have a ribber, and once you've got the hang of it, it really is quite simple if a little time consuming. So a reformed rib is as stretchy as a normal rib. It has face and reverse stitches and can be worked as a 1 and 1, which is a single rib, or a 2 and 2, which is a double rib, and even a 2 and 1 rib, which is also sometimes known as a commercial rib. And all of these rib structures can be reformed on a single bed knitting machine. This video is going to concentrate on reforming a 2 and 2 rib on a Brother KH260 knitting machine. The yarn I've used is a worsted weight yarn, which is slightly heavier than a UK double knit, but is still a medium weight yarn. And for this project, the main stitch tension on the machine is tension 4, and it's important to remember that as I work through the video because I change tensions, but mostly the rib is knitted in tension 4, the same as the main stitch tension for the project. Now when you start to set up a rib on the machine, depending which structure you're going to do, you need to actually make sure you have the right number of needles. If you're working a 1 and 1 rib, you would have to work on a number of needles that are divisible by 2 plus 1 to make sure your edge needles are the same, if that's what you want for sewing up. If it's a 2 and 2 rib, as in this example, the number of stitches must be divisible by 4 plus 2 to have matching end stitches if that's what you want. So you begin by working a waste yarn cast on across all the needles you want to use for your project. And an open edge cast on can be worked with a cast on comb, as in my example, which was on a Brother machine, which uses combs. But if your machine doesn't have a cast on comb, then work a quick weave cast on in order to have an edge you can hang weights on, because you want this to be evenly weighted. Once you've cast on, knit several rows in your waste yarn, ending with the carriage at the left. In my image, the waste yarn is the pale blue and the grey, because I've just tied ends of yarns together to make the waste. Now in your carriages at the left, set your main tension to 10, very loose tension, and swap your waste yarn for a ravel cord or a draw thread and knit one row from left to right. Swap back to your main yarn and set your tension dial to 4, which is the main tension that we're using in the project, and knit one row. Set your tension dial to 2 and knit 2 rows. Then set your tension dial back to 4 and complete the required number of rows for the rib depth. What these tension 2 rows do is give you a nice tight edge. Now you need to decide how the rib is going to look from the face of the knitting, and if your face stitches that are away from you on the machine are going to be the right side of the garment, then you want to make sure that the pairs of stitches that knit on that side are in the place where you want them to be. So you need to decide which pairs of stitches will remain and not be reformed, and which pairs will be reformed, and organize the needles across the bed accordingly. And in this image you can see I've brought some pairs of needles slightly forward and left some back, so I can play along the bed and make sure they're where I want them to be. Now when you're working this reformed edge, you'll need to work out a way that suits you best, but I'm right-handed and I like to start at the right-hand edge and work towards the middle. I also don't work right the way across the bed. I then work towards the middle from the right, and then I go to the left edge and I work in towards the middle of that one, so that I meet in the middle. Because if you work straight across the stitches from one end to the other, you'll find the stitches become tighter as you approach the opposite edge, and it becomes harder to work. I also find when we start dropping stitches, which we'll be doing in a minute, that if I drop the right hand stitch of each pair first, this makes it easier for me to work. But as I've said, you will have to practice and develop your own favourite method. So now you're going to start dropping your rib. Start by dropping the first right hand stitch of the first pair that are going to be reformed and ladder the stitch downwards to the waste yarn. So to do that, bring the needle forwards, drop the stitch, then use your finger or the tool to drop it down, but you only have to go as far as that waste yarn. So now you've got this wide ladder. Take the latch tool, holding it upside down with the hook pointing downwards. Insert it into the first right hand sinker loop that's in the main yarn. Twist the tool anti-clockwise and slip the now twisted loop behind the latch. Then reinsert the hook under the first bar of yarn, pick it up and pull it through. Work up the ladder, pulling through a new stitch with each bar of yarn. When the last loop is on the hook, pop it onto the empty needle. So watch the video to see how you pick it up. You push the hook through, so the stitch drops behind the latch, and the new bar of yarn goes into the hook of the tool. Then you repeat. Make sure the stitch goes behind the latch. Use your fingers to manipulate the stitches whilst you're doing this. And as you can see, I'm holding down the knitting with my left hand so that I've put some tension on those bars and stitches I'm picking up. And that makes it a lot easier. And you get to the final one. You've got your last loop on the hook. Pop it onto the empty needle. And I've done that by interlinking the hooks and slipping it over. Now you have a lovely line of knit stitches on the back of your knitting. Now you're going to work the left hand stitch. So drop the left hand stitch of the first pair and ladder it as you did for the right hand stitch. Insert the latch tool upside down as before, but put it into the left hand sinker loop in main yarn. Twist the tool clockwise so the stitch is twisted, and then reinsert the tool into the bar that is now the ladder bar that's now to its right, picking up the first bar of yarn into the hook and pulling it through as you did earlier on. Now the latching of this left hand stitch is a little trickier as the yarn has become quite tight by now. So do use your fingers to separate the bars of yarn so that the correct one is picked up. And make sure you don't split the yarn, as it's very easy to do this when you're working with quite tight yarn and you've got your fingers in the way and the tools being pushed in. Repeat this all the way up. It might be a bit tricky to get that last stitch on, so use your fingers, manipulate it with the tools, be happy that it's on there, that it's neat, that it's not split. If it is split, just sort it out with the latch tool and with the transfer tool. Then when you're happy with that, you've got your 2 rows of face stitches on the reverse of your knitting, which is the first of your 2 needle ribs. Carry on working on the next pair. It's shown here starting with the left stitch, just to show you that the different way it can be done. Work across the bed until you have all your stitches done in the way you want to, and then before you knit the first row of your main project above the rib, bring all the needles out to hold position to the full extent so that they will clear the stitches properly.